Welcome to Üretim Bandı. As you can guess, I'm speaking English right now. It's because we have our first English-speaking guest, or non-Turkish-speaking guest rather. And our guest today is Juan Pablo Costanzo, who is the head of design at Jeff. Welcome, Juan Pablo.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate the invitation. I always enjoy talking about product, anywhere. So this is going to be fun.
Perfect. So the reason why we're doing this is because we want to learn from each other, and knowledge is everywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be constrained by the language. So that's why we're trying to get in touch with anyone, basically. So thanks for being our first English speaking guest. Before we dive into the questions, could you please just give a short intro of what you've done before?
Yeah. So I'm originally from Uruguay, tiny country in South America. And I started as a graphic designer, like many of us, started this journey into design, from graphic design and back in the days, So in around, July 2000, I moved to the States, to California. And then there I began my career in product design in the Silicon Valley. So I was working for many of the big companies, their big corporations like Walmart, PayPal, Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce giant, and a few other startups. And then from there, around 2.5 years ago, moved to Valencia, Spain, just to change a little bit the scene. And I'm leading the head of design. I'm the head of design of Jeff.
And Jeff is, I think, recently entered the Turkish market as well, who's actually run by one of my friends, Balamir, who've actually done this introduction. So thank you, Balamir, as well, if you're listening. Could you give a short explanation of what Jeff does and what kind of a business you guys are doing?
Yeah, Jeff is it's a almost 5-year-old startup, and we started as a marketplace for laundry services. Connecting the dots. Connecting people who needed their clothes washed and service providers. And then a couple of years into that, we're starting to find, marketplaces are really hard, to manage and to give that standard of quality. So we're starting to notice that, we have some people, they have their own rules, services, and companies, they run the business the way they want to run it, so we couldn't guarantee a certain level of quality to the users. So we decided to start selling franchises, so helping, the community, from a business perspective, to have a package solution, to that person, who might be an entrepreneur, but they don't know where to start. And then, standardizing some of the services, and the quality of the services. And this was a great, because now we're starting to add, technology and infusing technology and data to these business owners that they might not have, the resources to do that themselves, because usually they're smaller stores, and helping them, to make better decisions, and being a little bit more intelligent. And then to the final user, giving a standard of services that we really want it to be, because, in this market is becoming more and more challenging, and more the bar is starting to rise, a lot, so you need a certain standard for people to use their services. And then from there, we found a model that, these franchises are, our package, and we started to explode in some of the emerging markets, like Latin America. It's one of our primary markets. And then starting to expand, Southeast Asia, Europe, and in Africa. And then from there, we started to say, what if we do the same thing with different verticals, and different line of businesses? So we launched, a year ago, we launched gyms, beauty salons, and massage parlors too.
Okay, so you guys started with just one service, and then you implemented let's say, the infrastructure and the business model, put on the franchise model on top of that, and then you're now moving into different business service lines.
Yeah. That's the way we did it, and we tried to infuse, the product thinking into this. We test, we have, we learn from the previous vertical, and launch, we know what to do or what not to do. Of course, you have some details, when you launch, a beauty salon is a little bit different than a laundry service. But, there are some fundamentals that we already know and use all those learnings into launching a new vertical.
So you said something very interesting. You infused product thinking into this. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So for us, and we're in a big wave of turning the company around, and we're aiming, and our vision is to be a product-led company, meaning that we spend a lot of time what we call in discovery. We develop something that learning from different of our experiences. We call it the product outcome loop. So basically it's like how we can learn fast and fail fast and make decisions based on outcomes. And we translate that not only into the digital world, but into the physical world, because we work, like it's very, like the stores, has, like different touch points, and they're very, like it's in the physical world. And then, we make decisions on the digital world too.
Just for people to understand the scale of what, of Jeff, how many people are working at Jeff, roughly, just a range?
Around 350 people. Yeah, something like around that.
350 people working. You're active in, I think, close to 40 countries?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. You have 4 business lines, active in 40 countries, with a 350 people team. Are most people in Spain right now?
Yes. Yeah, most of the people we're in Spain.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a pretty big operation. And as you mentioned, this is very operational business model because it's a service business, but also it has the franchises as well. And you have to have, you said the bar is high because I guess the competition is high, or, or the customers are expecting a certain level of experience when they come into a company or when they come into a store. So you have a big task at hand. Mm-hmm. How do you do this? So let's start with, the team. Can you talk about the product team in general, design, product management, development? Like how big is the team and how are they organized?
Yeah, so just the product team, we're about 70 people. And we are organized, we use the same Spotify model, with squads, and chapters and guilds and all that stuff, So we are divided, we have, the 2 big, areas, which is the consumer, like, people interacting with the applications or with the business. And then we have the partner side, and then we also have another area that it's our internal users. So those are the 3 big areas that we work, the product team works. So in each squad, we have the product manager, product designer, and then all the engineers, front and back end, so, and that model or that structure replicates, right now we have laundry, which is our focus, not main focus, but our main, business line, because it has a 4 or 5 year old sure. History. And then we have the other one that it's beauty and relax, kind of like the same, for the consumer. And then we have, the partner side. We have logistics also in the partners, because for laundry, we have drivers that do the delivery. So they need a tool for that. And then we have the internal users, which we develop also tools internally to help partners,
Okay, and that's the SaaS provider product. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, we have the partners. It's kind of like the SaaS provider, and then internal users is our internal
the back end of it.
Yeah, our internal tool that we use to help our partners.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
Partners they don't have a vision of that.
Okay. So you guys basically the top breakdown is by user type, let's say, or user profile. Like the end users is one squad or one chapter or guild, whatever you say. One part is partners and the other one is the internal users, which is the team.
Yeah.
And you guys have little squads of PMs, designers, and engineers. Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that as you scale the product, you just scale by adding another squad into the mix.
Yeah, that was it. But it also depends, how, because we're trying to not reinvent the wheel, every single time. So we're trying to,
sure.
For example, in partners, we are not divided by vertical, like you might, that team might be, being the partners for helping partners for laundry and for beauty, for example, because they have similar needs, like at the end they want to manage their business. They want to, provide a service, and they want to book, like whatever it is, like if it's a gym class, or they want to book, like a hair appointment too. So
I see. And how do you guys manage these teams? And by manage, I mean, what kind of goals do they have? What kind of KPIs do they have?
So we work with OKRs, and we believe that, because to tell you about that, I need to tell you how we work, too. So bear with me a little bit. Let me go one step back.
Absolutely.
So teams, we want them to work in being in a continuous discovery process, meaning that they're the ones that go really deep into problems, understanding the users, understanding what their problems are, the pain points, and what they want. And then from there, like they come up with the OKRs, for a quarter. Those OKRs, they need to align, of course, with the business objectives, and that's how we align. But it's a bottom up. It's more like a bottom up approach rather than we go this way, because we want that, like everywhere, in the company, not only inside of product but outside of product, we're working towards that goal to be, like spending 80% of our time in discovery, and launching tests, or talking to users, talking to partners, and listening what they're saying, like understanding the market. So, for us, for me, like for example, that I'm leading the team of design, I just need to make sure that the team aligns, with the main goals. But I'm not gonna say, oh, you need to work on this, or this needs to be prioritized.
So I think this is important for you guys because you mentioned it more than one time, this continual discovery, the fact that you want to be aware of the problems or the opportunities at all times, that this should be an ongoing thing. And you mentioned that you guys do tests and you talk to users and partners to do this. How do you make sure, or what kind of processes or culture that you have that it ensures that you keep this balance to the point where, you prefer? So you spend most of your time talking to users or doing tests. So how do you put that in, and, how do you do that in day-to-day operations, basically?
Yeah. It's a fine balance, right? It's like, and we are constantly talking to the teams and help, our goal. So it's like do a lot of training to the team. So basically, teams and individuals, they learn different tools, and our goal as managers too is like to empower them to be quick and know which tool they need to use at what time, because we have a process, like it's a standard process, like where we'll go to, okay, so what's the problem area? Then we do and start doing like discovery, understanding the problem. Like that might be like, okay, so there's data that is telling us that something is happening, right? And then we say, do we need to go deeper with users and do interviews and do shadowing, for example, and understand what problem it is going on there, or they might not talk to the user and then rely on data. And then from there, we go to the definition phase. So to really attack problems, you need to define them really well, because you don't want to be too broad, that it's going to be hard to solve. And you don't want to be too narrow that, it's going to be hard, not to think and stretch yourself, to come up with different ideas. And then from the definition, then we go to the ideation. We ideate different ideas. Like we try to what we call it. You try to go broad and try to think. Okay, so is there other ways to solve the same problems? Like, is there something that we're not seeing that we can like improve ourselves or bring in innovation? And then from there, we go to test. Like a big test. If we need to do like A/B test. If we need to do, like a smaller test or usability test, and then from there we launch. But that, and I just and I know that I just explained to you like it's a very linear process, but it's not also, like it's a loop,
Sure.
So you might go from one step to the next one, and then you might go back, into the learning phase, or you might go back to the idea phase, like it's always continue, like that's why we call it continuous discovery, because you're trying to learn as much as possible.
And these discussions or these loops or, going back and forth through different stages, They happen on the squad level, right? The team
Yes,
level.
yes. And that can take, it might be in a couple of days, you can go through the entire loop, or it might
Mm.
take a month, because it's a bigger problem, that you're trying to do, like, so teams are always, in those loops, through, or it might be, like it's a clear example. It's also a design sprint, right? It's you go through that process, and the design sprint in 1 week, so you force a team to go through different areas, learning as much as possible, and then by the end of the week, you're launching something, some solution for a problem.
How big are the problems that the teams are working on? Like, how do you ensure that, because of, what one of the things that agile or, similar, let's break it down to small pieces and work on it and test quickly kind of methods has, or one of the counter arguments to that is that how can we make sure that we tackle the big problems or the big challenges? How do you ensure that, you have that balance within the team? Because you guys give, as far as I can understand, give a lot of autonomy to the team. And you make sure that, because you said the OKRs come up from the continuous discovery phase that they do, and they come up with the OKRs, I'm sure, together with you.
Yeah.
But so they basically manage their own KPIs as well. So how do you make sure that they are thinking bigger than they can, or how they can also tackle the big problems or think innovatively as well?
Yeah. So we have also our vision, right? Like, so we want to be, do this, or become, I don't know, like one of the problems that we're trying to solve in the app right now, for example, is like the app doesn't scale because it was designed for one service, for laundry. And now when you start adding other services, the app is not scaling, and the experience is broken. So our vision is to, be I don't want to call it a super app, in a way, but it's like how, it can be a centralized place for users where they can see all their services. And so that's a vision. How we get to that vision is up to the team, like it's because if not, we're going to be putting too much strain, because that vision usually, you need to start validating each step, and that's how the teams are going to be doing. And with that vision, we have also the North Star metrics too that we want to tackle too at the same time. So we make sure that, like everybody knows or understand where we want to go, and it's not attached to a time frame, but it's a okay, so that's our North Star, like let's go that way. And then from the teams are figure out, like, okay, so how we can start getting closer to that vision.
How many teams are there, like individual teams?
6 or 7, something like that, around that, top of my head.
If you were to think about, and you don't have to name them, if you had to think about the better teams, what do you think makes them better?
Yeah. So I think, like one is like understanding outcome, like that's what we want to do, like sometimes there's it can be really hard, because of a history of where we're coming in software, like we're more related into tasks and do this, to and that's the output, we don't. So when the teams start thinking about outcome and how I can change a behavior of a user, and it can be measured, that's when you start having the better teams, and it takes time, it doesn't come naturally, especially and then I know that we can talk about this a little bit later in the interview, but here in Europe, it's that we're still trying to learn, and like how to help the teams to work, towards outcomes and not outputs, because the history in design, I was a designer. I'm not a designer for a long time, like just like from design was, okay, tell me what to do and I will do it type of thing. And now, we're asking designers, for example, to be very strategic, thinking about outcome, thinking about, whatever I do, I have a purpose, and I know that purpose, what it is, and how do I help the users, and reach those goals, and also understanding business too, because it will be naive to say I will fix everything, for the user, but not thinking about how the company makes money.
So you guys instill this business understanding or customer understanding into every position, not just business or product teams, but also design and probably engineers as well.
Yes, everybody. For example, like in that, engineers, PMs, and product designers, they need to understand business goals, but also the same, like they need to understand the users. And it's not rare at Jeff that engineers go to user interviews, not only usability tests, but sometimes, they go and interview users themselves too.
And what usually happens when it's like the first time that an engineer goes to a customer visit?
Yeah, it's a change, right? It's like engineers are the same as designers, right? It's like, oh, sometimes, like, tell me what to do. I just want to write code, but we're pushing to understand, okay, that line of code or that button that you're designing, it has a purpose, and what's that purpose? And so we also spend time helping the teams to, getting trained about, like, how to do interviews, how to take notes, and how to turn all this information into insights, like, because it's something that you need to work on it. And of course, it doesn't happen overnight, or maybe the involvement of an engineer in those interviews is not that much, or it's like 20%, whatever percentage is. But like it helps, like, to bring solutions, from different perspectives. When an engineer hears a user, like, that is having some problems, like, they were immediately going to start thinking about how you can solve that problem from a technology perspective, because he understands the pain point. And then when the designer is listening to the same problem, from another angle, they try to solve, okay, so how can I help this from the user perspective, the user experience perspective. And that's when you make the product better, and more richer, because you're attacking this from different angles.
Okay. So Jeff is doing is a very offline thing. The actual service and experience that the end users are, experiencing is mostly offline. As the head of design, how do you instill the design aspect, or how do you make sure that the design as a whole is, to your standard? Not only the UIs, but the service or the experience as well.
Yeah. So just to so you can understand my team also, the way that we're structured is like, I manage the product designers, and also what we call the service design and innovation. So that team has, researchers, and one researcher and two service designers. And service designers, they help to understand the whole journey, not just what happens inside of an application, but also, like, all the different touch points, like, and from any perspective, like, for example, if somebody is interested in buying one of the franchises, like, service designs help, to understand, why, this perspective is trying to buy a franchise inside of Jeff, and is choosing Jeff and not McDonald's or any other ones. And then once inside of Jeff, why they're choosing, fitness and not laundry, like, and the journey starts there. And that's how also design is inserted there, because we have this service design approach that comes, from a more broad perspective, and marrying those two worlds, the offline and online.
So that's very interesting, because you guys actually have an arm inside the design department that is solely responsible for the service design part, so the offline market. So how does this, I'll call that person offline person. How does this offline person work with the online part of the business?
Yeah. When you say the offline, meaning the service designers, or
yes, the service designers. Sorry.
Yeah. So this, it's they're the ones that helps Everett to understand what's going on. Like, so it's kind of like the glue between the two worlds in a way. Because they give that perspective. Like, all the pain points that happens anywhere. It can be, again, it can be somebody that got their clothes all wrong, for example, like, they, to the standards that they wanted, like, that, I don't know, a shirt has something there, or they got late to delivery, what happens, and because traffic and stuff. And also, so it gives the real world perspective into the digital world too, because when you're trying to solve something, for example, about logistics, you need to take care of, like, cities are different, like, you might have, like, I don't know, Istanbul, it can be different than Valencia here. Valencia is it's a smaller city. It's more like a big town, and it's not, like, or Sao Paulo or Mexico City. So you need to understand the context of what is happening, so you can help to solve the problems in a digital world too. So it's they're constantly, like connecting everybody.
How do you make sure that they speak the same language? I mean, you said that that team is actually the glue between the two worlds. Are they mostly people coming from the online world and they've transferred into the service design part, or are they coming from, I don't know, the offline part of the business and found themselves in this position?
It's both. We have, for example, somebody has a background in psychology, or like so, or research, like that helps a lot, in the research part. Sorry, my kid pop out there.
No worries.
Yeah,
No worries.
that's the life now, right?
Sure.
So they have different backgrounds, as in product design too, like it's like, or anybody in this in technology, right? But they have certain skills, in understanding the psychology behind things, like or it might be, understanding behaviors, so they can help, with that, or understanding how to take insights and listening, to a customer. So they have different skills, and skill sets that are there. I think it's not that it's only going to help, the digital world, or the offline or the online world, it's
Mm-hmm.
human behavior in a way.
Okay. So how do you prioritize goals? Let's say, I don't want to say issues or tasks, but rather goals, because like we said, there are 40 countries, 4 business lines, 3 different customer types. I mean, let's talk about one customer type. Within that, how do you prioritize between countries, business lines, or, the part of the funnel that you're going to focus on, etc.?
So yeah, that's a kind of like a two-part question, or answer,
Sure.
because one way to prioritize is basically, having, clear business goals, and knowing which metrics we wanna touch, and that's how, like you prioritize all these problems that you're starting to find in the different verticals. For example, like if they're starting to align to that metric, that North Star metric, then it's a good prioritization exercise. So that's how, you start working towards that. And then the other part of the question that you ask, like, because we have, different countries, different markets,
Mm,
when you work in a more global market or experience, or product, you need to find what's common between the different countries, and different segmentations, so it's a mix between a segmentation and what is helps, to solve the problem for a specific issue. For example, also, I was leading the experience for PayPal, for example. Like we were working in 120 different markets. It's impossible to start solving problems for Turkey that it's only gonna help Turkey. Like when you start segmenting, users, then you forget the cultural variable in a way. So a Turkish user, it might look similar to I don't know, like a Spanish user or a Mexican user, because it hits different the same targets. It might be that user, or that segment might be, okay, so family, a family member that it's, has, like 2 jobs, like one, her husband, and her, they have two jobs to like to make ends, like, and they have, they're, like, for example, like a middle class, and you don't define, middle class, because a middle class can be, if you define it by how much money they make, like 10,000 euros can be completely different in in Mexico or in Turkey. So but you define what
sure,
is a
yeah.
middle class, and then that middle class, it kind of like has the same standards across the globe. So that's how, like you don't work specifically on each market, and then you might have, like
Mm,
some things that it's going to be specific for that market, but usually then you mix all this segmentation with, okay, so this is a new user, so a new user will have these characteristics. They never used a service before. They just sign up because they heard from a friend or from a Facebook ad, whatever it is, and then they're just trying out this service, and then how you gonna start, crossing all this information together, and,
sure.
and working more a global solution rather than a specific country-based solution.
So, I mean, there are certain things that obviously need to be localized, like, currency regulation, stuff like that, especially in the case of PayPal, which is like a financial tool. I'm sure there are a bunch of like, fraud related or financial regulation related things that they need to localize. But apart from those things that obviously need to be localized, is there a relationship between, or is there an effect of quote unquote culture on how the product is used?
It might be, there's some, it depends, of course, you might have, an Arab user when the, like the writing is right to left,
Sure.
and that might have some things there, or it might be that in certain countries or certain areas, like gyms are not gonna be, for both genders, like it's just for one gender, for example, like then you start having that kind of like problems, but you try to solve those problems a step before, like so you try to be, as broad and quote unquote broad as possible, so you don't fall into those categories that it's gonna cause you a problem. Then you have to look into each market and into each culture, like to fix that, and then it will be so hard to maintain.
Okay, so you're first and foremost prioritizing, let's say, the top of the funnel, or the part where it applies to everyone, so that, with one change you affect many people as opposed to just one market.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to switch that question into a different aspect. So you've spent time in California, in Silicon Valley. You've worked with American companies, very Silicon Valley based companies, and you've worked with Alibaba, a Chinese company. You've worked with now a Spanish company, but I mean, let's face it, all these are global companies. It's not that they're only working with they're not, local companies. They're very, very global companies. But have you seen across the markets, now that you worked in like multiple markets, including Uruguay, have you seen differences in ecosystems in terms of how these ecosystems build products?
I mean, of course, you have, like an ecosystem like the Silicon Valley that is very mature, and they've been doing this for a long time. So it's kind of like they crack the code in a way, and they're continuously innovating, like not only services, but, the way to work, and how to improve the whole process, right? And then you start, here in Europe also, it's very interesting, because the quality of professionals is really high, but also in the way that, how the process of doing, like developing or designing product is still in the early stages. You might have, like some countries and some areas, like for example, Sweden with Spotify, or, Booking in Amsterdam, or Zalando in Berlin, that they're very advanced, and they've done it for a long time, but in general, Europe is still trying to figure this out too. But I think that the quality of these ecosystems and innovation, like it's causing, I think what is changing, I think a little bit, it's used to be everybody wanted to go to the Silicon Valley and work there, and everything. If you want to be somebody, or if you want to learn, just go to the Silicon Valley. But now that is changing, and like we're talking about, how now the world is a market, and Silicon Valley companies are hiring everywhere, they're expanding everywhere. So I think that is spreading all over the world, and of course you have, like some cultural changes or you need to adjust, but it's, it's this globalized world and globalized way of working, it's happening fast,
Yeah. I mean, I think we're much more similar than we think, because we're following the same people on Twitter when it comes to like, product building. We're trying to learn from, let's say first Silicon Valley, then Europe, then other ecosystems. I mean, we're all listening to music through Spotify, so we're, familiar with the experience there. We're all familiar with Stripe, Shopify, Amazon, all those companies. So I think especially this ecosystem, like the technology, software, startup world, I think you're right in the sense that the world is now our market. We can hire from anywhere. We can work from anywhere, especially now with COVID. And I think it's it's an exciting time, because it's going to open up so many possibilities, both for the employment side and the company side. I think there's going to be, as we get more, a cohesive group, I think there's going to be some interesting, companies coming up from places that we're probably not going to expect.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I totally agree. It's that, usually, like before the transfer of the knowledge, it took a little bit more time. And now, like you're saying, like we're listening to the same people, like listening to the same podcast, like if a podcast is very popular in the US, it's going to be popular in the rest of the world, or vice versa, like it might be, I think you need to think about global, like it's globally. It's like I might see maybe some difference, like what, let's say for me, another market that was fascinating was the Chinese market. And before joining Alibaba, I didn't know much, and because it's, the rally is like it's 1.3, 1.4 billion people, and they speak Chinese. They don't need to speak English. In a way, like the rest of the world, kind of we all speak English, right? So, but what is happening is it's very fascinating. What is happening in China too, like the speed that they move, and the innovation that you turn any corner and you see innovation everywhere, and like for example, I always tell a story like I was in Alibaba in 2014, there, and I think that when Apple Pay came out, a couple of years later, Alibaba was doing Apple Pay 10 years ago, with Alipay, and it seems innovation in the West, like like in China, they were doing that for, I don't know, 5-6 years, so this was very fascinating for me.
Yeah, as you see the Chinese market, it's really cool what they're doing right now. I would hope that, we would get more of those experiences into our know-how as well. So I think that also ties into what you've talked about, which is it's a one huge market now. It's a combination of all countries in the world. So when you think about the Jeff product culture, let's say you're moving on to a new opportunity or you're building your own company, you're going to start your own company. What would you like to take from the current, Jeff culture and take it with you to this next move?
Yeah, like any company, I think that you start learning and you become, I think, better professional, but I think that what Jeff is doing great, I think, is how to think really fast and try to change the culture as early as possible. Try to establish that culture, of continued discovery and always talking to users from the beginning, from as and everybody has to do that, because that makes a lot of change, on the outcome of everything that you do. So for me, it's like always, it's, because I saw this change at PayPal, for example, trying to do continuous discovery back in 2016, 2015. And of course, a 40,000 or 30,000 people company, like it's really hard, but it can be done. But when you do it at a small scale, when you start early, and establish that culture, I think that makes it easier in a way. So that, I think that's what I love, even though it's a 5-year-old startup, like it's 300 people, which is not a small number. That cultural change and how to establish that, and talking to the user and trying to understand, the pain points as early as possible. That's, that's something that I will definitely bring to my next role if it ever happens.
So you moved actually from a much larger company to a smaller company, even though it's like 300 people now, 350 people. It's still, 5 years old is not a long time. So it's still a startup. So what did you, transfer from the previous company to Jeff?
Yeah, process. For me, that's, like larger companies, when they mature, they start working on the process and how, like you do things a certain way that it's working, and how to adapt, and do it fast. Because and at PayPal we were like 200 designers, like that, almost the size of Jeff, just the design team there, So, for example, research, the way that PayPal was doing it, they have some core researchers there, but also how, they make sure that they could serve these 200 designers, with a proper process, and that didn't mean for them to do the research themselves all the time, but also how they transfer this knowledge and start teaching the team how to do a better job at doing research, and that comes with a lot of, training and a solid process. So for me, that's kind of like what I brought here.
You said research and I kind of want to dive into that a little bit. So as the company grows and as the number of people gets bigger in the team, you have to at some point scale your operations, and that means processes or individualize and specific teams working on specific tasks. Just like, you separated research into a different department. How do you ensure that, while you get this advantage of scale and a different team, how do you ensure that the individual contributors or the builders, the designers, the developers, the PMs still get the actual sense of the market and the customers? Because hearing from someone, like we always say, is, difficult. We say, go to the customer, talk to the customer, but how do you make sure that you keep that when you put in a research layer, for example, in the middle?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest parts, but also that's the reason why we believe that the entire team or the entire squad need to spend time understanding the user. And that can come from different sources, data, the squad, they need to come out, even though that we have a data team will go more into the depth, and try to collect all these crazy data that is happening, in any company, and try to put it in a way that it's understandable for anybody else who's not a data analyst. But there are certain data points that the team can do and can come up with, or do research. PMs and product designers, of course, they work with Mixpanel, try to understand some of the data, some of the funnels, some of and behaviors. Interviews, like what we talked today, it might be, product designers usually are the ones who are leading these into the squad, but also, help the rest of the squad to really spend time with the users. We also have another initiative, Jeff, to spend time, like an hour each sprint or an hour each month, listening to calls from the customer service line. That will give you a lot of insight of what's going on, and anybody can do it, like from a PM or an engineer. At PayPal we had, throughout the office, we have these couches that you can connect your headphones and listen to recordings.
Wow.
Of the users, and at any time, so you need to do things also to connect the outside voice, let's call it the user, the outside voice into the inside of the company. So it doesn't get lost, and you might find different ways to do this too.
That's amazing. That was very cool. Like there are like headphones on the walls that you can just listen into the conversation. It's cool as a gimmick, but also it's very cool as, it shows the team what's important, basically. Yeah.
And that's a common practice in the Silicon Valley, and now, even startups, they do that now, in seeing okay, how can I listen to the customer, all the time, now with Slack, there's they usually have, a channel that is connected to your Twitter feed, for example. Every time he mentions your company, what they're talking about, and how you connect all those data points too. So
yeah, Juan Pablo, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your experiences. It was great to learn from you, get to know you, and Jeff as well. Thanks for being our inaugural English-speaking guest. Hopefully this won't be the last. Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you again for the invitation. I really enjoy it. And whatever you need, just let me know. I always love to talk about, my experience and learning also from others, their experiences. So I'll promise you that from now on that you're doing this in English, I will listen to the podcast. I cannot listen to the previous podcast because I won't understand. Okay. But my Turkish is rough on the corner. So yeah. But yeah. So congratulations also.
There is no Google Translate for audio right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's listening. See you in the next episode.